Orchestration is perhaps one of the most fascinating art to master in the whole musical domain. Not every great composer was called a great orchestrator. What's your chance of becoming one then? Orchestration is perhaps one of the most complex and mysterious skills to master for a young composer, and it was even harder before notation softwares were invented. It was complete imagination. You didn't typically have an orchestra at your fingertips. You had to really know your stuff. If you write a piece for a solo instrument or for very few instruments, you know it's quite possible that you can have some sort of a dialogue with the instrumentalist. You can ask questions about technical matters, sound possibilities, notation, and so on. There's a lot to learn, and there's time for learning. Orchestra is another story. It's complex, it costs. Rehearsals are typically just the bare minimum. You can't afford to spend time adjusting parts, trying this or that solution. Score and parts have to be ready way before the first session of rehearsals. And if you have no experience, if this is your first time writing for an orchestra, what do you do? The answer is always the same. You study, you get prepared, you observe the examples of the great composers of the past. If you're lucky enough to have a good master, you show him your work, but in all cases you do need a guideline. Korsakov's Principles of Orchestration might be one of your first options, and you would be right. I've recently restudied this book, and I want to share with you 5 important things plus a bonus one that I learned and that I will add to my set of composing skills. 1. Study the scores. I know it's obvious and it may seem strange for a textbook, but the main lesson that Korsakov is trying to teach you is that orchestration can be learned from examples. Given the fact that you already have a good knowledge of all the instruments of the orchestra, what's their timbre, their range, how they sound in all their dynamic range, what's their volume compared to the other instruments, their technical possibilities, and so on. If you already have, let's say, a good knowledge of the instruments of the orchestra, the best thing you can do is to open and study as much scores as you possibly can. Play them at your own instrument. Deepen the orchestral thoughts of the composer by pretending that you are one of the musicians of the orchestra. Play the first violin part, then the second violin part, then all the woodwinds, the brasses, the percussion, each and every instrument. When I was a composition student, I knew that maybe one of the best methods to learn composition and orchestration by the great composers of the past was by copying them, and I mean literally. You take a piece of orchestral music, let's say a movement of a symphony, an overture, it could be anything. You take it and you copy each and every note, every articulation, every dynamic mark, everything. If you have the will to do that, and it takes a long time of course, it's really the best thing you can do. You learn so much, even if you have no idea of what you're putting on paper. But then you pick your favorite recording of that piece. You open your copied score and you listen. The whole orchestra will be inside your brain. Every phrase, every combination of sound, how a chord is distributed between a section, how accents and sforzato are made, everything will be so much clearer. Go to the concerts. Another obvious one, but really you can't even think of learning the basics of orchestration if you don't become used to the sound of a real orchestra. The fact that music notation softwares and VST orchestral libraries are getting easier to use and they sound always better, it doesn't mean we have to forget what the real thing is. Go to the concerts, go to the rehearsals, it's even better. One of the most important phases of the learning curve of whatever subject is repetition. In rehearsals, you have the chance to listen to the same passage over and over, and this is pure gold. 3. Harmony. A correct progression of parts and a very good distribution of the chords is essential. This is your starting point, and there's no hope you will write a good sounding harmony if it doesn't sound good in the basic 4 parts at the piano. Parallel fifths and octaves don't sound very good, we know that. But even if you write known tonal music, if you know how to handle the basic 4 parts, you can learn how to write for 8, 15, 30 and even more parts. In orchestra you have duplications. For a simple triad, you can have a lot of parts doing the tonic, the third, the fifth, and you have to choose where all these duplications have to go. The number one rule to follow is that the harmonic series is widely spaced at the bottom and it gets closer at the top. What I mean by that? The first interval of the harmonic series is an octave, then we have a fifth, then we have a fourth, then a major third, then two minor thirds, then there are whole tones and semitones in the end. You can see that in the lower register the intervals are wider than in the upper register. This is a natural balance, a blueprint to know and to follow for a good distribution of the chords and a good distribution of the instruments. In other words, don't overcrowd your low-middle register. Preserve the space around it. Make it breathe. Your chords and your duplications should be distributed as the harmonic series suggests. 4. Every combination is a new instrument. Let's say we have a beautiful melodic phrase in the soprano register. The violins, of course, can play it. The flute can play it. The oboe, the clarinet, the trumpet. It's really your choice, and whatever instrument you choose, the melody will be okay. But what if we double the melody and we give it to the flute and the oboe, the flute and the clarinet, the flute and the violins? If it's well written for both instruments, and it's well played, you won't hear twice the same melody, but the sound will be a blend of the two instruments. For example, if played together, the clarinet will render more resonant the weak sound of an oboe without losing its softness, or it will be more powerful if paired with a trumpet. The flute will enrich the texture of the violins, and so on. If the volume is well balanced and one instrument doesn't prevail over the other, you will have a new timbre, you will have a new instrument. All sorts of combinations can be made, not only in the upper register and not only for melodic lines, of course. To know all the possible sounds of the orchestra, how and when to use them, how to balance those combinations, this is the real art of orchestration. 5. Balance, it's not the conductor's job, it's yours. Every single time I have encountered balance issues in the orchestra, I've always asked myself, whose fault is this? The conductor's or the composer's? There are different cases, of course, but I can say without any doubt that a well-written piece of music for orchestra requires less efforts in this sense. Maybe the problem lies in the number of the instruments, the strings, for example. Maybe there are not enough to balance the power of the brass section, and this happens quite often in small orchestras. But this is not the composer's fault. A good orchestrator knows exactly how many string players are needed in order to balance the wind and the brass section. Korsakov tells you everything you need to know. For example, the same note played by a flute needs the whole row of the first violins in order to be matched in volume. Two woodwinds need 2 rows of strings. The sound of a trumpet is equal to the sound of a trombone, but the sound of a trumpet is equal to 2 French horns. The combinations are endless, and the musicians will naturally and hopefully adjust their dynamics if needed, even without the help of the conductor. But as a composer and orchestrator, this knowledge has to be mastered. Bonus: orchestration is composition. As Korsakov says, it is a mistake to say that composer scores well or that composition is well orchestrated, as orchestration is part of the very soul of the work. What he means by that? I think that he wants to suggest that the young composer should try to think in orchestral terms right from the very beginning of the musical idea. If you write your sketches at the piano, maybe you write in treble and bass clefs, and it's fine, but it's recommended that you already imagine your orchestral sound, a certain tone, a particular effect that maybe you can't even reproduce at the keyboard. It's a good thing that you already think of the technical possibilities of some instruments, the key in which a certain passage is easier, or the tempo of a rhythmic pattern. Korsakov is perhaps a little severe when he says that as you cannot learn to become a musical genius, you cannot learn to become an imaginative orchestrator. Therefore, I strongly believe that you can learn to write your musical idea in a playable, organized and convincing form, just like you can learn the fundamentals and the basic principles of the orchestral writing. And this is exactly the purpose of his book, which by the way is available for free. I find it extremely valuable, even today. Even though music has changed so much, and the instruments are now capable of expanding their technique to unlimited results. The principles of orchestration may be not so strict today as they were when Korsakov wrote his book, but they remain valid, and I cannot suggest more to study it and make it yours. Hello, my name is Damiano Davide, I'm a pianist, composer and conductor. Thanks for watching another video of my YouTube channel, A Musical Journey. Please share your experience and your personal thoughts about Korsakov's book or orchestration in general. Consider subscribing if you like this video. See you the next one. Ciao!